It's time for the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of a Utah sports tradition at utahsummergames.org. Participate in over 50 sports around the state. Then plan to join the opening ceremonies Friday, June 5th, presented by State Bank of Southern Utah. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games.
Do you love the Tabernacle Choir? This year, the choir's music is everywhere you are. Listen to your favorite choir songs and music and the spoken word anytime you want on Alexa by simply enabling the skill.
Alexa, play music in the spoken word.
Now playing music in the spoken word.
You can also download the Tabernacle Choir app, subscribe to the choir on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and have access to all their wonderful music. Happy listening.
You know what's coming.
Your daily deep dive into everything Utah Jazz.
It's time.
All season long and even in the off season. It's Jazz Daily with JJ and Alex on your exclusive home of Utah Jazz basketball. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back, JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Steven Sylvester in for Alex Curie on this Friday. Taking into the weekend. Should be a great weekend. Masters going on. Should be a big story over the weekend. And the Utah Jazz are going to end their season. 2 games left in this rebuilding era. Eric Spyropoulos of NBA.com and Utah Jazz joins us now. Eric, 2 games left in this era. I'm sure that everybody with the Jazz and everybody that covers the Jazz is excited for what's to come next.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've kind of heard a few glimpses from Will Hardy over the past couple of weeks. He's been, remaining present on helping the young guys develop over the final stretch of this regular season. But there have been moments where he's talked about, occasionally he'll be on a run or just be kind of, sitting around thinking about next season and all the potential with that group once they're healthy and put together. And, we'll see what happens in the off season. But 2 more games for young guys to get opportunities. And then from that point on, it's on to the draft and building towards next year's team.
What's the magnitude of this game? I don't want to say the magnitude of this loss for both the Grizzlies and the Jazz tonight, but what's on the line for both of these teams? If who wins and one loses, what can flip with these 2 teams by tonight's outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, some of the same stuff that it's been the case for both teams over the past, month or so. It's that kind of lottery positioning. The Grizzlies are in a position where, they don't have any protections on their pick. They don't owe the pick. And so they're basically just trying to maximize their odds of jumping into that top 4. And right now, entering today, they're tied with the Dallas Mavericks for 6th in the lottery standings, or 6th worst record, as you would say. And for the Jazz, I mean, they're, obviously it's well known that their pick is top 8 protected. Right now, they are tied with the Sacramento Kings for the 4th worst record. And if they finish with the fourth worst record overall, it's a guarantee that they will keep their pick because they can't fall past 8. If they end up with the 5th worst record by the end of Sunday's games, they will still have a 99.4% chance of keeping their pick, but there is that 0.6% chance that it would fall to 9 and go to the Thunder. So the Grizzlies have a little bit more flexibility in terms of their pick. There's no protections. They're just trying to maximize their odds. The Jazz are just trying to make sure that they keep the pick overall.
You're looking at the injury report here, and the Grizzlies have 12 players out, totaling $128.2 million worth of salaries.
Jeez.
And in all seriousness, the league has got to obviously do something about this, or maybe they don't. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Of all the things you've heard about when it comes to tanking, is there anything that would actually work, or is this just a product of a great draft and a big number of franchises that are at a crossroads?
Yeah, I think it's it's almost both in a way. I think everyone agrees that the league needs to do something to shake up the lottery odds or just the system overall to kind of incentivize winning, basically post-trade deadline, post-All-Star break in a season. However, I do think that, it is maybe being a little bit understated just how great that this top of the draft class is, which doesn't always happen to be the case. You've heard a lot of people talk about the 2027 draft being really weak. And I think that naturally has led to teams, like the Jazz, the Wizards in the Eastern Conference, made those trades for Trae Young and Anthony Davis, and they look like they're going to compete next year. I think a lot of teams are kind of looking at, front offices are always surveying beyond what's right in front of them. It's not always just this year's draft class. They're always looking at next year's draft class, next year's crop of free agents, things of that nature, and take that into consideration when kind of building out their team and building their plan. So I do think the league needs to do something in terms of just, changing the odds enough so that, it incentivizes winning in the second half of the season. But, we had this lottery odds shakeup a few years ago in 2019. It went into effect with the current system, and here we are today with everyone talking about it nonstop. And so you kind of want to make sure you don't, rush into a change that you think will fix the issue, and then 5 years from now, it might be worse. So it's going to be a careful balance, I think, for the league to handle, but they're clearly focused on doing something, this offseason.
I'm curious your opinion on who's increased their draft stock, since that NCAA tournament, right? We got Michigan who won the national championship. They have a lot of transfer-in players that played great together this year, led by Lindenborg, Big Ten Player of the Year. Did he improve his draft stock? And what did the March Madness tournament do for some of those guys before this NBA draft lottery comes to a fruition in June?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting because I don't think much of the top four has really changed. Yeah. Cameron Boozer had a solid tournament run. Darren Peterson's run wasn't super long. AJ DeBance's run wasn't super long, but AJ had been playing really well towards the end of the season in general, and it seems to have kind of gravitated more towards that number one spot with Darren as the two players most mocked at number one, followed by Cam Boozer. Caleb Wilson, the fourth player on pretty much everyone's boards, was injured and didn't play, down the stretch of the season or in the tournament, obviously. And then you look at a guy like Keaton Wagler, who had a run with Illinois, and obviously, like you said, Yaxel Lendenberg, who also, led Michigan to the national championship. I think those guys are guys who improved their stock. Darius Acuff had a crazy run leading up to the tournament and some nice games in the tournament as well. He raised his stock. But I think if you're looking at that top four, it's probably still kind of set in stone with those players.
Eric, you've done some great work breaking down Ace Bailey's rookie season. And right now you can go to NBA.com/Jazz and check out what you just wrote about Ace Bailey's growth on both ends during this all-rookie campaign. You've got a video where you've done some film study on Ace Bailey. I'm curious, during this project, what have you learned about Ace Bailey and what he's accomplished his rookie year and what it means for his future?
I think, the thing that was the main takeaway from, I think, not only working on those projects, but also just kind of watching Ace's development over the year is that he, I think, is ahead of speed when it comes to the stuff outside of his scoring. He had a really up and down first half of the year. He was sick in the preseason. That kind of delayed his start. And then he got momentum kind of late November, early December, and then had a hip injury at the end of 2025. And that kind of halted his progress. But over the past 2 months, obviously you've seen the shot making from three, the big dunks. But I think, his playmaking, his defense are two areas of his game that they won't necessarily always make the highlight reels because he has those dunks and he has these higher scoring games. But those are the parts of the game that not only impact winning at a smaller level, but also the parts of the game that Will Hardy is most excited about moving forward. And, you put it all together, how he's just fit into how the Jazz want to play. You see not only a player who can take over a game, but also perhaps more importantly for the Jazz next season, a player that can just thrive within the system, playing off of, the other lead scorers like Alawi Markkanen, Keontae George, and Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think when you put all those aspects together, he's not a well-rounded player right now. He's not the most consistent two-way player right now, but he's 19 years old, and no one expected him to be that this season. But you saw the glimpses of how he could be that player, and that's what's most important for him in the Jazz.
Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The RealReal.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The RealReal? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The RealReal than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The RealReal. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
Ace Bailey's a big point, obviously an important part of the Jazz future. This lottery pick they're going to have here shortly is going to be a big part of that future. You look at the rest of the young players in this roster, though, and there's some uncertainty there because as this team transfers from rebuilding mode to playoff mode, they may go all in on getting some veterans in the rotation. What could this mean, and what do the Jazz look like as far as roster building goes moving forward? I'm not asking you to predict what the future is, but how could that change, and how could it impact some of these young players on this roster?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the more, outside of what happens with the draft pick and any potential free agent signings, I think the development and the roles for the rest of the young core, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Kyle Filipowski, Bryce Sensabaugh, how do they next year? How ready are they to contribute to a team that is competing for the playoffs next year? Right. I think those are two huge questions. And quite frankly, it's, we don't know yet. And I think that's going to be, one of the more interesting aspects of probably that first month and a half of next year, assuming all those guys are on the roster, how many opportunities do they get early in the year to prove hey, I am ready to fit in with this group. I can contribute to winning right now. They've all have gotten a lot of opportunities this season. Isaiah Collier, unfortunately, less so over this final stretch due to the hamstring injury, but they've all had flashes of Cody Williams can, impact the game defensively and, score efficiently inside the arc. Kyle Filipowski has a really versatile skill set on the offensive end. Bryce Sensabaugh, elite shooter, but also can kind of do a little bit more off the dribble. And Isaiah Collier, obviously just a change of pace, point guard, speed, playmaking. All of those skill sets can fit into a winning team, but like you said, the Jazz are looking to compete next year. They might look for more veterans, in the summer. It's going to be a real challenge and a real test to see which of those young guys can step up.
As you look at what these young players have accomplished, it's hard to judge because we've been these weird games where they're playing lineups with a lot of guys out and some of the numbers may be a little bloated. It's tough to judge that. But based on some of the study you've done and what you're watching, what is some of the growth of some of these guys like a Bryce Sensabaugh or Cody Williams? How much of that is real and could help the Jazz next season?
I think Cody Williams is one of the main guys to start with in that conversation because wings are obviously super valuable in today's NBA. Obviously, 3 and D wings are the most valuable, and Cody has not been able to knock the 3 down consistently. But what he has been able to do is impact the game defensively. And, with his cutting, and he's kind of showed off, more of his mid-range game over the past few weeks and looked pretty comfortable doing so, has been able to kind of generate some offense to stay on the floor. And given his size, his length, and, how the Jazz are looking to compete next year, and obviously that's going to have to come with a lot of growth on the defensive end of the floor, considering how much offensive talent the team will already have, looking at a guy like Cody coming in there just to kind of impact the game defensively and, make some cuts and some, smart plays in transition, you can easily see potentially a role for him on a winning team. Bryce Sensabaugh is an interesting case. Teams need production, especially off the bench offensively. He has been, he's had a little bit of a down year from 3 overall this season, but has been really hot over the past, since the All-Star break, essentially. And if you're looking at, we need a guy who can space the floor for our star players offensively, a guy that if he's in the corner, the defense can't leave him. He can't come over and, provide help defense at the rim. Otherwise, it's a wide open 3 for Bryce Sensabaugh. another role that you can totally see, him filling on a winning team and, the Jazz next season. And Kyle Filipowski can play both, front court positions and can handle the ball, can rebound, can shoot the three a little bit. Again, all these skills that can fit in. And Isaiah Collier, again, similar to Cody Williams and, hasn't developed the three ball, but in transition, he can change the pace of a game on his own. And throughout the course of an 82-game season, that's something you might need.
That's why I think it's interesting. You're talking about possibly doing some more moves in the summer. I'm like, especially with the previous moves of bringing Jaren Jackson, I'm like, this team is pretty nice.
It is.
You have right now. It's like, of course, you got Nurkic and a couple guys who are a little older. You can probably move, but for the most part, this team is pretty set and well-rounded, especially Keontae George stepping up this past season at the point guard position. It'd be interesting what they want to do with veteran moves in the offseason.
Yeah, I think, it might not be a very explosive free agency for the Jazz or even in trade season. Inevitably there'll be a move or two, and, the Jazz should have, access to the mid-level exception, which, in today's NBA can get you a pretty solid rotation player. But I think people will have to remember, obviously Jaren Jackson went down with the surgery in February, but he is, the acquisition for this team. And even a guy like John Conchar has been a solid rotation piece down the stretch and is under contract for next year. So a guy who can fill in some minutes as a veteran guard as well. So, it's hard to say. You can never predict the future, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is a marquee addition for this Jazz squad, and he only got to play in 3 games before going down. That is what fans, I think, need to remember about next year's team is, imagine if, the Jazz traded for him in the offseason. That'd be the talk of the summer, but it happened in February, and so it's kind of been a little bit out of mind. That is what I think fans' mindsets need to be going into the summer.
Eric Spyropoulos, digital writer for NBA.com and the Utah Jazz. You can see his video film breakdowns on YouTube and all of his writing on UtahJazz.com as well. Eric, thanks for joining us. 2 games left. Enjoy tonight and what's left of the season, and obviously it's going to be a much different beat here coming up here shortly.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for having me.
You got it. Thanks, Eric.
Man, it's crazy, exciting, all the feels are going on right now for Jazz fans, right? I'm excited for this season and the tanking to end. I'm excited for the draft lottery and the excitement that brings. I'm excited for JJJ and that trade and what the potential of him and Markkanen and Keontae on the floor at multiple times is going to do for this type of team in the promise of it. So there's just a whole bunch of feelings going on right now if you're a Jazz fan, and rightfully so, man. This is a crazy time of year.
Yeah, I think we want these 2 games to end. It's like
hurry up.
Like Old Yeller.
Hurry up.
Sorry to invoke Old Yeller, but it's time, right?
Out to pasture.
There's some beautiful horses out there, but eventually they'll end up at the glue factory. So let's put these Let's put this tanking period into the glue factory and move on. There's so much excitement about what's coming for this Utah Jazz franchise. I cannot wait for the next chapter. It's going to be great. And that chapter starts as soon as that Lakers game ends and 1-2-3 Cancun on Sunday. So, all right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll do a top 10 on JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.